Hello, I'm Emily Cronta, and this is Eric Chenary, Kristen Smith, and Joshua Monty.
For our project, we have developed a feedback system for an insulin pump, also known as an artificial pancreas. These devices are used widely by type 1 diabetics.
This project is especially applicable because over 1 million Americans have type 1 diabetes. Additionally, it's forced us to broaden our horizons and look past feedback systems other than mechanical systems, which we've been learning about in class.
I have type 1 diabetes myself, and I actually use an insulin pump to control it. While I'm really thankful for this technology, and it's made a big difference in my life, I think that there are several steps that could be taken to really improve upon the technology that's already here.
The pancreas is responsible for secreting a hormone called insulin. Without insulin, glucose would be unable to go from the bloodstream to the cells.
Once insulin has entered the bloodstream, it can bind to insulin receptors embedded in the cell membranes. These receptors then release a signal, causing a GLUT4 vesicle to bind to the membrane. This allows the glucose molecules to enter the cell and be metabolized into energy. However, if no insulin is present, the GLUT4 vesicle never receives a signal to bind to the membrane, and glucose has no way of entering the cell. This results in a high blood sugar.
Diabetics are unable to produce insulin on their own, and therefore an external insulin source is needed.
The most common insulin pumps in use today require the user to manually enter an amount of insulin to give based on the blood glucose level. What makes our project special is that based on the blood glucose level, the pump would actually give an amount of insulin based on the blood glucose, and so no user input is required. The two main metrics that we're going to be looking at are insulin and concentration of sugar in the bloodstream. We'll be looking at fast-acting Novolog insulin, which is the most common type for insulin pumps. And that is just simply measured in units. And then for the bloodstream, we'll be looking at milligrams per deciliter of sugar in the bloodstream.
Here is our block diagram for our system. The input is a unit step of the desired glucose level. It goes into insulin secretion, and our GFS function is a combination of the pump and the body. That feeds into the disturbance. Disturbance could be food and water consumption, as well as exercise and other bodily functions. The output will be the actual glucose level, and then the feedback loop tells us how much more insulin needs to be secreted or not in order to make sure we have that desired glucose level. For our transfer function, we started with a settling time of 3.5 hours. This stems from the first insertion of insulin until most of the glucose has been absorbed. From there, we converted 3.5 hours into seconds. From there, we took the values for finding sigma based on our knowledge of settling time. From there, we got sigma to equal 3.6 times 10 to the negative fourth, making our total final transfer function 3.6 times 10 to the negative fourth over s plus 3.6 times 10 to the negative fourth. The reason that we need a first order system is because we can't have overshoot with such a fine system, because there's no way for the pump to bring the blood glucose level up, just bring it down.
Here's the deal. As Eric explained, we have our pole as 3.6 times 10 to the negative fourth. So this is going to be a negative pole in the left-hand plane. Using that, we know that this system is going to be BIBO stable, which is good news. Also, we know that there is going to be a very large settling time, which is due to the human body more so than the feedback control system. And also we know that there are going to be many disturbances that enter into the system based on physical activity, food consumption, and different items based on physiology as well. And then lastly, we know that our input is a unit step function. And so from here, we can start to really model our system in Simulink.
The design specifications for this feedback system are necessary due to the fact that without them, the feedback system would be completely useless. We had two different categories: transient and steady state. For our transient category, we had a time rise of 30 minutes. This comes from literature, and it tells us the time from injection to the effectiveness of insulin. For the steady state, we had a final value of 100 milligrams per deciliter. This is from literature as well, and you will find it in the last slide of our presentation. It is considered an average level of healthy glucose in the blood. For our steady state error, we came up with a value of 0.1. This isn't as important as the other two due to the fact that everybody's body is different and allows for more room for error as the body fluctuates.
We put our transfer function into Simulink and made a few adjustments. Here we've added a -50 because every unit of insulin added decreases the blood glucose concentration by 50 milligrams per deciliter. This -1 here cancels the negative feedback loop. We put a constant 150 here, which represents an example starting glucose concentration. So if the patient had 150 milligrams per deciliter of glucose, that would be too high, and this feedback system is lowering that to 100. Here you can see a scope which measures the amount of insulin secreted over time as it lowers the concentration from 150 to 100. So this graph has the general shape that we're looking for, decreasing to our final value, although it doesn't quite get to 100 yet, but we can see that the rise time is much too small, so we need to add a PID controller so we can adjust those two specifications. In order to find the values for our PID controller, we had to use SiZo-Tool. Using the aforementioned 30-minute rise time, we solved for a frequency of 0.00122 radians per second. This means that we need to add a 0 location before this point. The steady-state error that we mentioned earlier is 0.1. Solving for Ks, we get Ks is greater than 10. In decibels, this is 20, which means we'll start by dragging our gain to 20 decibels. With our function in SiZo-Tool, we added a real 0 and an integer. We chose the value of -0.0005 because it was approximately half of the omega n that we just solved for based off of rise time, which was 0.00122. We then opened the root locus editor window. Here we can adjust the gain, and as we change the gain here, we can see the changes of the rise time in the step response window. We continued to adjust the gain until we got the goal rise time of 1800 seconds. From there, we returned to this window and got our PID values from here. The 0.11158 is our KP value, and KI is equal to 0.11158 times 0.0005. We went back to Simulink from there, opening a PID controller, and input those two values. Here we have our final block diagram.
The last step of our process is to take a look at robustness, which is a measure of uncertainty. In layman's terms, how much can go wrong before we're in trouble? So when we take a look at the gain margin, we see that we have an infinite gain margin here, which actually means that no matter the change in gain, our system is going to be stable. Our phase margin is at 86.2 degrees, which means that we can have a shift of 86 degrees and still be in the stable range, which is a pretty good uncertainty. If you take a look here, this is the final graph of our system, looking at the blood glucose over time. And so with this system, if we start out at 150, the correct amount of insulin is given and it's brought down precisely to 100 milligrams per deciliter, and the rise time is sitting right about 1800 seconds, exactly where we want it.
So to recap on what we have reviewed in this presentation, we started with a problem, which was a manual insulin pump, which we discovered was too much effort. So we designed a feedback controller system that would allow for a proper amount of insulin to be secreted over a given amount of time to arrive at a final value of glucose in the bloodstream. Our values that were taken from the literature was a rise time of 30 minutes to arrive at a final value of 100 milligrams per deciliter. From there, using the PID controller, we accounted for different fluctuations in the body as well as a negative feedback loop, which we made positive. And from further refinement, we arrived at this graph, which met our specifications.
Our project of an artificial pancreas will allow diabetics to let their insulin adjust to their lifestyle, rather than having to adjust their own lifestyles to meet the needs of diabetes. Thank you for a great semester, and have a good summer.